All right, Shabbat Shalom, everybody. This is the Cited Moon newsletter, June 12th, 2020. It's titled Blessing the People. It is the 20th day of the fourth month in the year 5856. That's a Shabbat Zoom meeting, which just finished a while ago. The world has gone crazy. This week, the Trumpet.com magazine posted the following introduction to the current events on the nightly news. So it talks about how the world around us has gone insane. The news media, they're pushing a plan to defund the police. Winston Churchill is coming under attack for being racist. Big businesses are cheering on the Marxist, I'm going to add communist movement behind it all. And the police simply walk away as police chiefs and mayors decide that upholding the rule of law isn't worth the effort. How did the world get so crazy? It almost defies understanding. Mainstream politicians and so on donate to Black Lives Matter, an organization that claims to protest the state-sanctioned violence and anti-Black racism present in America and Britain and all over the world, really. Its website states that they disrupt the Western prescribed nuclear family. Their leaders encourage people to resist white capitalism. We have to not only disrupt the systems of policing that literally kill our people, but we have to disrupt the white supremacist, capitalistic, patriarchal, heteronormative system that is really the root cause of these police killings, said California State University professor. She's a BLM leader. Yet this wildly radical movement is being supported by Disney, Facebook, Lego, and many other companies. Cisco, Microsoft, and Intel have all donated to BLM and other companies listed there. On top of this, I also saw this week a white woman kissing the feet of a whole crew of Black Hebrews. Governments seriously discussing defunding the police departments and giving those billions of taxpayers' money to Black Lives Matter, and those things they are demanding. So I did read about this disrupting the Western prescribed nuclear family. I take that in multiple ways. Obviously, they want to disrupt the classical, mother, father, and children picture, saying that it should be open to different scenarios, and real life dictates that. Yeah, obviously you'll have different scenarios, but the ideal is still that prescribed way that God intended, anyways. So when I read their statement, it wasn't completely. I think a lot of conservatives take it this way, that they just want to disrupt it. But what they're trying to say, when I look at it from their point of view, is that it's not only that that it has to be that way. There's other ways a family can look, and I see their point. But when you look at only one side of the picture, from the left or from the right, then obviously there's going to be biases there. Okay, mayhem. We spoke about this last week, so I'm not going to go into that. It's just talking about the intensity coming up in the phase 4 from June 14. That's tomorrow to July 4th. And that's going to be the most intensity, 75%. Last week, we had the dark moon, or lunar eclipse, over Asia, India, Middle East, and Africa. This coming week on June 21st will be part 2 of the planetary events. Are you watching events in the South China Sea? So China is just becoming more, I think, aggressive. It's essentially what it's saying here. Okay, here's what's happening in the Philippines as of June 9. President Duterte announced he intended to cancel the Philippines-U.S. Visiting Forces Agreement, a defense pact that has facilitated comprehensive security and humanitarian cooperation between the allies over 2 decades. So no more American bases in the Philippines, Duterte demanded. They have to start to talk to us because they have to go. He also called on the U.S. to correct travel bans and sanctions imposed on his inner circle, which seemed in part to be motivating his anger. His move outraged the Philippine defense establishment. But then last week, Duterte staged a dramatic reversal, recognizing the importance of this relationship. So he decided to suspend his decision to cancel it, and he cited political and other developments in the region. Those geostrategic developments revolving around China and COVID are far more important than Duterte's government has let on. But the move also tells us much about how the fiery president has strategically matured in office. So I find it perplexing because I do perceive that both President Trump and President Duterte are very much nationalistic presidents. I don't see why they wouldn't get along, but I think they've been a little bit played by China and the communists to believe that they're each other's enemy. Well, in truth, they're actually closer to each other's philosophies and the way they govern their country, focusing on their countries first and opposing globalism, basically. So we have news here that Burundi's president died. I'm going to try to pronounce the name, Pierre Nkurunziza. Yeah, I practiced that. So he died at 55, cardiac arrest, quite tragic. That's still relatively young, I would say. I would say that's a little suspicious, but anyhow, that's just my opinion. On the 17th of the fourth month, the stock market began to fall once again. I do hope you are all recording all of those events on your monthly perpetual calendars. So we were told last newsletter to look at what would happen on the 17th of the fourth month, which was, I believe, 3 days ago. Let me just see. 3 days ago. So anyway, we're looking into, this is pretty much the gist of the newsletter now. What does the Torah teach about parenting? So the Guide to Parenting Part 1. I'm just going to scan over it. It is quite lengthy, but I'm going to look at and highlight the big parts of it. So I'm going to, just for the sake of, I'm going to pause recording and just go over the big highlights. Okay, so Part 1 of the Guide to Parenting. There are 3 verses that tell us how to parent. They come from the priestly blessing, and ironically, they used this in the Zoom meeting during the prayer. It was very touching, and here are the verses. We translate this as, may God bless you, or maybe I'll just say the name Yehovah. May Yehovah bless you, keep you, and may he watch over you. May let Yehovah shine his face upon you and grant you peace, and let Yehovah lift his face towards you and grant you peace. Now, when we think about these 3 verses, they strike us as biblical poetry, which is hard to understand even under the best of circumstances. It's poetry. It's written in Hebrew, second of all. And so these verses seem to be suggesting or praying that God should have some sort of positive influence in our lives. But can we nail it down a bit more specifically? So I'm going to pause again and just cover more highlights. Okay, so we're looking specifically at the word bless. What does bless mean? It's a nice spiritual sounding word. But Rabbi Chaim of Volozhin, I don't know how to pronounce that, a student of the Gra, the Vilna Gaon, lived a few centuries ago. He writes about this in his classic work, Nefesh HaChaim. He argues the word blessing doesn't just sort of have a vague spiritual quality about it, but it's very concrete in the meaning, in its meaning, in the sense of increase. The word blessing is associated with the idea of multiplying, increasing something. When we ask Elohim to bless something, we're asking him to increase it. So, for example, in Deuteronomy chapter 7, verse 13, it says that Elohim will bless the fruit of your womb, will bless the fruit of the earth. It means that he will increase things. You will have lots of children. You have plenty of food coming from your crops. And indeed, that notion of blessing has been associated with increase. It's actually hinted at in the very letters that comprise the word in Barak. Okay. So I'm going to pause again. Okay, so it talked a bit about gematria. I don't believe in gematria, so I'm going to skip over that. You can read that if you like. It's not something I want to focus on. But the word in this context of the blessing of the Kohanim and on the context of parenting, you might say that we are asking God to be a wonderful parent to us. What does it mean to be a wonderful parent? Very first thing, it means to bless your child, to multiply their strength, to build them up in whatever ways we can. It is the fundamental obligation of a parent to build up a child's physical strength, to nourish them by feeding them, to build up their emotional strength, to give them resilience, to build up their intellectual strength or education, to build up their moral strength by helping them to discern right from wrong in all sorts of ways, in all sorts of situations, to build up their own power to provide for their own families by giving them the tools to learn a trade, to learn a profession. Our fundamental job as a parent is to increase our children in all sorts of ways, in whatever ways we can, to help them grow. But that's not the only obligation we have, because it can be coupled with another one. May God bless you and keep you. It means here, Yish Marecha, means to watch over you, to guard you. The second fundamental obligation of parents, which goes hand in hand with blessing them, is watching over them, ensuring their safety, keeping them from harm. Sometimes that harm can come from the outside. Actually, a lot of times it does. You give your kids rules, and only cross at the crosswalks, for example. Look both ways. Sometimes the harm can come from the inside, from within your own family. Sometimes, we hear reports of a lot of sexual abuse in families that usually comes from a family member, shockingly. Children can veer off in irresponsible directions, and the need to discipline the child emerges to protect them, sometimes from themselves. But discipline is always a function of keeping the child safe in one way or another. It is really the only rational way for discipline. You don't discipline a child for your needs as a parent. You don't discipline them because they make you look funny or they make you ashamed, or publicly and whatnot. It's not for the kid. That's for you. The rationale for discipline is to watch over them so that they can grow. So these are the first two fundamental obligations of parenting, but they're not the last. The rest of Birkat Kohanim, the blessing for the priests, outlines the rest of parenting. What else is required? Well, the next two fundamental phases of parenting. Let God shine his face upon you and grant you grace. And it's different from let God lift up his face towards you and grant you peace. The theory I'd like to suggest, let me just pause it because I'm going to get the gist of this. So there are three phases of parenting, and you have to do them phase by phase. You can't skip. Each of these three phases of parenting, I want to suggest to you, is associated with a certain phase in the child's life. There's different seasons in people's lives and different seasons in parenting as well. So these different phases, these kinds of parenting, these steps are more appropriate than others. So if blessing a child and guarding over them is something we must do throughout the child's life, is there a particular phase within their life, the child's life, when these obligations are most prevalent? Let me ask you this: when do they begin, those obligations to bless and guard over them? Many of us say that begins at birth, but I would like to argue, no, they actually begin before birth. They begin in the womb. Indeed, that's what a womb does. The fundamental job of the womb is to increase a child, to literally physically build them up, to build the child. That is the source of the idea of blessing in the womb, is a source for the idea of guarding, of watching over, because the other thing the womb does is provide a pristine environment that protects the child from all sorts of harm. It gives them a place, a safe place in which they can grow. Throughout a child's life, we have these two obligations: to provide safety and to build them up. But those obligations start in the womb. And when you think about it deeply, those two obligations, to bless and to guard, they boil down to one Hebrew word. It is a word that is derivative from the word womb, and the word is rechem. There is a quality, parents, I'm not sure what that word is, what they do towards a child, they call it rachamim. It is compassion. Compassion has two subcategories. One is to nurture them, to help them grow, keep them safe. That's what the womb does. That's what compassion is. But that's not the only thing we do. A good parent does more, because if compassion is the fundamental building block of parenthood, you can build on those blocks. It brings us to the next two parts of Birkat Kohanim. What are they about? We're going to look at this now, part 2. Let me just pause and get the gist of it again. So I'm just looking over this article or this 3-part guide to parenting. And to be honest, my gut about this is that it is primarily an opinion piece. I wouldn't take this as the gospel. It's not exactly what the word is saying. Because if you take this as the gospel, you're making someone's opinion the gospel. But what this is essentially is, when you break it down, the actual blessing is God's blessing on the Levites. This is how you should bless the Levites. But this person is using this framework to use it as a tool to parent, which isn't bad in and of itself, but that's not really the purpose of it. It can be a tool to help, expand other ideas. So that's what he's doing. So just take it as opinion and remember that. So the 3 kinds of love encased in Birkat Kohanim. So the first kind is compassion. The second kind is to shine or illuminate. So let me just pause once again because it gets a little bit verbose. So the next one is called unconditional love. Unconditional love, undeserved love. It is different than compassion. Compassion is the love you give something to attain something. It's conditional, but you're trying to build your child up. You have a goal. So a parent would like to see their child have reached their potential. There would be no room for compassion kind of love if they didn't believe that, I should say. It's impossible to build. Indeed, a womb is very discerning about the rachamim it bestows. Rachamim is not unconditional love, but chayin. Grace is unconditional. Grace is love that has no goal. It's love for its own sake. It's love because you are my child. I can't help but smile when I look upon you. It's like when you think of, when someone has favor in your eyes, you'd have that grace for them, and they have grace in your eyes. It's the kind of love every father and mother knows when their eyes meet the eyes of the child and they can't help but smile no matter what they've done. It's something intangible. You can't measure it. You can't explain it. It doesn't come out of nowhere. It comes not from the future, goals that you will achieve. It comes from the past. It comes from what I've already put into you. I built you up. You safeguarded them 9 months in the womb, and here you are. I can't help but smile. So again, this is a lot of opinion, a lot of human psychology and sociology in here, and philosophy as well. It's unconditional love. This kind of love truly fuels the child's growth. It's what a child lives on. Once you have bestowed rachamim, once you give them compassion, once you've cared for your child, safeguarded them, invested in them, built them up, can't help but feel chayin. That sounds kind of German, but I'm going to pause it once more and just get more gist. So there's a third love too. It builds on the first 2. Once you have given them rachamim, compassion, and then secondly, chayin, or grace, you're in a position for the third kind of love. And what is this third love? Well, I'm going to tell you what it is right after I pause it. Okay, I was trying to nail it down, but it seems to me that the third kind of love is just meeting the eyes. God meeting his eyes with ours, and the child meeting their eyes with God. So it's like something you can't really measure either. It's really interesting. There's not really a term for it, but essentially it says, I guess nazo. I'm not sure what nazo means, but maybe that's the gist of what the third one is. You gaze at him and they gaze at you, and you give him peace, shalom. So maybe that's what it is. It's a moment of love. It's difficult love for a parent to give, but to truly be a parent means to let go. It means to accept your child, even in moments they disappoint you. So I want to end this little section saying that a very good suggestion is to tell your children every Friday night is this. It's understanding what you gave this person, commentator, the writer of this article, a handle on what it is they're saying. It makes those moments with my children more meaningful to me. If you don't bless your children on Friday nights or any other time regularly, consider doing so. I think this is very, very good advice. I want to do this myself if one day I have children, Yah willing. Consider using these precious words of Birkat Kohanim and bestowing them upon your child. Children love it. They're so delighted to be blessed by their parents. Actually, you look at the Old Testament, Jacob and Esau. Esau was falling down. He was breaking down because he didn't have a blessing. He said, Father, I need this blessing. He was crying, weeping bitterly. And the father said, I have nothing else to bless you with. And he said, please, anything. So he came up with a blessing, and it was a good blessing too, but it wasn't the same as Jacob's, but still, to be blessed by your parent, anything at all is good. Anything. As your child comes over to you, use those few moments to think about these three kinds of parental love, and ask yourself at this stage in my child's life, which one of those kinds does the child use? Do they need to be built up? Do they need to be guarded? Maybe they need the smile that says, I'm just so delighted with them. Maybe they need to see more chen, grace. Or maybe they need peace, shalom. Maybe they need to pick up their chin, to look them in the eye and tell them that I can go forward with them in love, even when they have a difference of opinion. They've chosen differently than I have. They've chosen a different path than maybe you would have wanted to if you live vicariously through your children. Like, say you were, I don't know, a baseball player, and they decide to play soccer instead, and you're like, but you still love them regardless. So the part 3 is letting our children go. I'm going to pause it once more, just get the gist of it. Okay, so this is a conversation between two people, Rabbi Foreman and Tamar Katz. So he says here, rachamim is associated with the word rachem, which is compassion, is associated with the womb. It's a very calculated kind of love, trying to love you, the child, so that in the future you can become. I'm not focused on the future, I'm focused on the now, the present. I like you just the way you are. You don't have to do anything. You're totally perfect. That is stage 2. And so that's stage 2, right? Okay. Also, stage 2 is just loving them just because. You haven't done anything yet, but you just love them just because they are. Sure, they're going to disappoint you, but you still love them. So what's interesting is that stage 2 also involves a sort of meeting of the eyes of the parents, between the parent and the child. I think this resonates with you. I'm going to read it. Let God's face shine on you. If you would imagine a mother beaming down towards her cradled child, there is something vertical about that relationship. She's looking down towards her child, but then the next stage is horizontal kind of looking, where I meet your eyes and you're an equal to me. You are a person who can choose just like me, and I have to accept your choices. But if I want to be mean about it, I could pull the guilt card, or I could just continue looking downcast. So imagine you're a child and you've done something I don't like. You've chosen a path in school, and this is different than how I would have wanted it done. But at the end of it, I decide, imagine I never look in your eyes again. So there's no mutual respect. The word for that is not disappointment, but more guilt. So you hope your kid will see your disappointment and feel guilt and change course. But the final gift that you give your child in the end is that at the end of the conversation, you can look at them now, not looking down on them, but across now. You look at them horizontally. Meeting of the eyes is giving them the gift of peace. That's the gift you give them. It is way easier said than done. So the challenge is this. If you're a parent, imagine you just got married. Let's say, oh, wow, your house is messy and whatever. So the parent tells themselves 100 times, they're going to be quiet. They're not going to say anything. And if you don't say anything, that doesn't work. One way or another, it slips because it bothers you. How do you even do it? So the Torah gives you this parenting manual and says at the end of it all, pull away and give them peace. Actually, it doesn't say that, but Okay, I think it says spare the rod, spare the child. But anyway, the Torah does not just tell us what to do, but explains to us you can actually do it. That's a challenge. So the model how to do this effectively is God. God is the creator of the whole world. 6 days, that's the womb. He's doing two things. The same two things in Yevarechacha and Veyishmarecha. He is nurturing, he is safeguarding. Nurturing is he's creating all the stuff, and then the other verb you get over and over again is the creation process. Vayavdel Elohim. God separated between this and that. It's like safeguarding. This goes over here, that goes over there. The sky and the water, for example, the firmament. There's two great energies of creation. The great energies of the womb, which is building and safeguarding. That's what God is doing for the first 6 days of creation. So it's getting very philosophical. Does God do anything else after that? The next stage is Birchat Kohanim, which is just the love of the thing for what it is. So God says it was very good. And he says that specifically after Adam was created. So he's the creator and he just loves it. He calls it good. He calls it very good. He's really taking ownership of it. And I'm just adding that. It's not in the script here. So the next stage would be separation and peace, right? So Shabbos or Shabbat, but this is Yiddish. Shabbos is Yiddish. It's a Yiddish word. It's not Hebrew, which is kind of, I guess you can sort of say it's like Aramaic, but not really. It's kind of like New York plus Aramaic plus America plus German. So those are 3 stages, and fascinatingly, we see it with God too. Something happens after stage 3, which shows you how God succeeds at stage 3. And he just lets go and grants us peace. That's the secret to succeeding in stage 3 is stage 1, actually. So if you go back into these verses, look at stage 2, God looks at everything, it's good. So the way you have success in stage 3, we let go, you have peace, and you have shalom. The kiddush shalom is that you have compassion over them. It's a circular thing or triangular thing. Let me just pause once more. Okay, so basically God put all of his energy, or he put an energy into his creation, and now he's pulling back. Why was he doing that? So he has a relationship with what he's created, and I think I could say that's factual. He doesn't create something and just leaves it alone. There's a sustenance. There's something that he nurtures, and he continues to nurture. If he just abandoned this planet, we'd all be dead instantly. So he's engaged in creation and building it. So he doesn't really have a relationship with it yet. They're an extension of him, of me. They're talking about parent to a child. But when you're done, something magical happens. You separate yourself from them, and then creation is an independent thing. They're imperfect, but they'll take care of that. I'm done. When that happens, what I've created is finally at rest. So I think this talks more about the parenting experience, that a parent invests all their time, energy, wisdom, everything that they can possibly invest into them, emotionally, physically, everything. And, once that job is done, that child can then be able to go on their own, so to speak, not on their own, but they don't need the parent anymore. So when the parent dies, that child, assuming they have a relationship with Elohim, then they'll be good. But they have to have that relationship with Elohim, and they have to have been taught how to have a good relationship with not just Elohim, but with your fellow man and your fellow Adam. So just want to add that there. So this is the last part of the newsletter. So what are the prerequisites to make Shabbos work? A relationship doesn't just happen. There's a sacred space in which a relationship happens. There's a new thing that needs to be nurtured, a new thing that needs to be safeguarded. It's no longer about protecting and building up that child. It's about protecting and building up their relationship. God is mevarech, the day. He blesses the day. He nurtures the day. What does it mean? So, as a parent, what's the impetus to never let go? You think you're losing a relationship with the child, but you think it's over. If you can't keep on fixing them, we're not going to be able to relate to each other. In fact, though, the opposite is the case. I'm going to connect to the child, but my connection is not coming through fixing. It comes through relating to an independent being. That's what I nurture, the relationship. You sit back, you enjoy it, and you appreciate it. What I pour my nurturing energy into, that's what you pour your energy into. The relationship. Having done so, this relationship is now special to you. You have to guard that as well, the relationship between yourself and the child. You have to make sure not to overstep your boundaries, because they're no longer a baby or a kid. They're now more like I'm not saying 100%, but in some ways they're like your brother and sister. They're a mutual Adam in this walk. They're no longer a small baby. So the dynamic changes. You don't fix them when they should be fixed. It is up to you to appreciate. So I think it's kind of Western mentality. I wouldn't say it's an Eastern mentality, but anyway, moving on. There's a positive aspect of Shabbos, and there's a negative aspect too. The day needs to be guarded, the seventh day. God sets aside the day. It is set apart. It is holy. Only he can do that. He commits himself not to tinker anymore. The inverse square law of gravity is the inverse square law of gravity. Okay, what? I'm not going to change it, even if I can come up with a better formula now. In the case of a parent, that's the committing yourself not to get involved illegitimately. To do so is to destroy now. You destroy the Sabbath through melacha. Okay, I almost want to skip this whole paragraph, but I'm just going to finish because it's the last paragraph anyway. If you work on the Sabbath, there's no Sabbath. I agreed. Well, there is, but you violated it. If you meddle with your independent child, you destroy their independence. What gives you the strength to do that, to safeguard these boundaries of this relationship, your appreciation of its richness? That's what gives you the strength. God was blessing the day. God poured his parental energy of nurturing, not into a child this time, but into the day. Understanding that you've invested in that richness, that's what gives you the strength. So when you walk into your kid's home, you shouldn't comment on how messy it is. You don't even raise your eyebrows at the mess. You accept they're different. You see the independence, and you realize that it's only the fact that they have that independence with all their imperfections that allows for this relationship you can have. You enrich your enjoyment of that, and that gives you the strength to maintain the boundaries that protect the sacred space of the relationship, to make sure it's always there for both of you. So this sounds kind of very Western, don't step on their toes and all that. But personally, if I'm going to be a parent, you have to criticize your kids. I'm not saying criticize them just to put them down. No, if they're not following Torah and you know better, you should tell them, I'm telling you this out of love, correcting you, that you should do it this way because this is how Torah tells us, for example. That's what Jehovah wants us to do. For example, if Moses never listened, was it Moses? Yeah. If Moses never listened to Jethro, to Yitro, and Yitro gave him advice, you're going to wear yourself out. If you keep going like this, you're going to collapse. But he gave him advice, and Moses was already older by that time. And Yitro said, set captains over hundreds of people. So if there is a big matter, tell them to bring it to you. But smaller matters, they'll deal with it. So if he didn't say that, and he said, I'm not going to step on Moses' toes. He's an independent person. He has to be his own person. I should appreciate that. Moses would have wore himself out. But I believe Jehovah, even though a parent could be 100 years old and the kids are 80, you don't stop being a parent. It's not wrong to advise them. But yeah, there are boundaries you should respect, for sure. You don't treat them like a baby. You don't talk down to them like a kid anymore, but you still have a role as a parent to advise them. There's nothing wrong with that. So I'm just going to look at the comments and then comment on the comment. Comment says here, the word nasa. Let me see. It says here, there's a Torah study that was done this week, or that this person did. She did this week from the rabbi's son. He teaches this word to lift up is nasa. And this word is the same word used to take a census. What Jehovah is telling them, what he's really telling them to do, is to lift up their face, to see his blessing on them. They are a new people now with a new identity, and the purpose of the census is to move them into their tribal identities and show them their new destiny, not as slaves, but as children of Elohim. They are to lift up their faces to him to be counted, not counted or valued as they were as slaves in Egypt. Now they are in a vertical relationship between him and oneself. Take a census also of the sons of Gershon. Okay, so that's the verse. The next verse of Aaronic blessing, you see the word gracious is chanan. Chanan. It means to bend or stoop in kindness to an inferior, to show mercy upon. What we see is Jehovah bending down and stooping in favor, a vertical relationship between him and us, his creation. This word is seen again in reference to outside the camp. This word is michutz, lemachaneh. So after the golden calf incident, Moshe placed his tent outside the camp. It does not denote a negative state. What happened here, even though it was outside the camp, Jehovah descended in a pillar of cloud and talked with Moshe. Jehovah bended down and talked with him, with Moshe, even after this golden calf fiasco. Camp is the word. Machaneh, from the verb root, chana, means again to bend down, to incline yourself, oneself. Now we're back to the Aaronic blessing of his graciously bending down to show us favor in the camp of set-apart people. A machaneh, camp, is the area in which an individual bends to the greater good and conforms to the expectations upon them in their family or the community. This is very good. I really like this comment. It's a very good teaching. This is where it really gets amazing. Wow, it isn't even the amazing part. Okay, let's see. When someone is placed outside the camp, as Miriam was, with leprosy, sara'at, as well as all who had a genital discharge, all who were toxically impacted by the affairs of life, it is for the purpose of recharging their relationship with Yah, allowing time for that person to recognize their sin, repent, and be restored back into the camp in a rightful position between Jehovah and that person. It is not negative. It is not an evil deed. That person is not an evil person. The deeper message is that the vertical relationship takes precedence over all horizontal relationships. It is not seen as punishment, but time. It is seen as time a person needs to reconnect and even overcome emotional issues that they've dealt with for a long time that have come to the surface. Do you see the freedom in this? The freedom for people to realize they are not evil, sinful people is really good. In many cases, people have had horrible life issues to deal with. Everything from regretting past abortions, adulterous affairs, losing a loved one, you name it. People come with heavy emotional baggage many times into this messianic camp. And guess what? When they don't fit in just right, they are made to feel even more inferior as being outside the camp, not as righteous as others, even to feel more inferior. With this new understanding, we can now see the purpose. It's not that they are a bad person to label them as such, but they need time to grow under his favor, the Father's favor, and for a relationship to become established with him, to realize who they are, to overcome great grief and those emotions of inferiority. Indeed, a time for him, the Father, to show his graciousness and to gaze upon us, to lift us up, all of us, each one of us, to be counted worthy of his love. That's the end of the newsletter. Very lovely comment. It's very good teaching. This newsletter, very good about parenting and very encouraging too. So I hope you all took something from this and can use it in your lives. Definitely, I'll think about that. God willing, the time comes for me to be a parent, to be compassionate. I think naturally I'm compassionate, but to remember the other two, to guard them, obviously to nourish them, but to also learn to let go at a certain point, to give them peace and to accept them as well. Because yes, there are times to correct, to criticize, to correct in love, but there are times to accept as well, because we all have our weaknesses, and accepting somebody for their uniqueness and even the weaknesses they have, and to help them get through it, can help a great deal than to only criticize. We must praise them as well. Remember to praise your kids, build confidence in them, and it goes a long way building a relationship on trust. And they will trust you. And if they could trust their earthly parent, then what more so they can trust their heavenly Father. So that's the end of this newsletter. I did try to cover the highlights. I didn't read word for word because, I just felt led to do it in this fashion. So if you like, you can read it on your own. But the reason I do this is to, save people some time and just get the highlights. So I'm looking more at the highlights of the newsletter. That's all for this week, and stay tuned for next week. And also a lot of more videos. I do a video daily. I'm covering basically the whole Bible, cover to cover, Genesis to Revelation, and we're on Genesis, I think, 6 tomorrow. So I've covered Genesis 1 to 5 so far, looking at the differences between the Septuagint and the Masoretic text. And what we found so far has proven that Jehovah is, not only is he Elohim, he's the greatest Elohim that one could even fathom. It blows my mind. Like, I'm just going to be real right now, but it says, what a wise God we serve. This God that we serve, this Elohim, Jehovah, is not only wise in his words and his Torah, is reasonable beyond any human reasoning, beyond any measure that one can measure, beyond any expectation, but is so compassionate, so loving. His attitude as a parent towards us, if you look at one of my videos, I can't remember the chapter right now. I feel like it's The Fall of Man, maybe, where it talks about the incident where God actually asks Adam, the way the conversation goes is not one where he's talking down to him. He's talking with a lot of understanding. He said, how did this happen unless you did this? Not accusatory. It sounds very, God still took care of him. Because I think a lot of what I've gotten from the Masoretic text in my 20 years is that God was, and I hate to say it, but seemed a little bit mean. But now that I read the Septuagint, I can see God wasn't being mean to them. He was very patient with them. And if you believe Book of Jubilees or Jasher, you would see that God didn't kick them out right away. And that incident didn't happen like on day 8. It actually happened 7 years into their being in the Garden of Eden. God only kicked them out a month and a half later because they hadn't thought to go after the tree of life. And Jehovah was just so patient, so slow to anger with them and with us too. I am just so happy beyond words. And you know what? If I cry, I cry. But, I really don't want to cry on the Sabbath day. In my life, I was nowhere, a teenager, I really didn't know why I was born, why I was put here. And I had a proclivity towards pop culture because when you're a loner, you can turn to music, to movies, to video games. Those things can't refuse you. But as much as much as I want to give credit to myself and say, I had a heart to seek out God, I know in reality, you want to break it down like to the actual truth. He found me. He found me. I had to find him. He found me. He finds all of us at a specific point in our lives, but at the right time when we need him the most. Because if he does it, he knows that it will be too late. But he rescues us right at our darkest hour to show that he's God. We can't trust on anything else, not even ourselves. I just want to express that, I'm so happy. I'm crying, but I'm so happy. These are happy tears. So don't mistake it as sadness. I'm not sad at all. I'm just so happy that he called me at this time in my life at all. He called me, whether it's at the age of 17 or 70, but he called me at the time he wanted to. And he showed me all these truths, about the Sabbath, about the Bible, the holy days. And, I thought that was enough. The holy days. I thought, okay, you know what? That's good enough for me, God, right? Clean, unclean meats is good, the plan of salvation, your kingdom, God, that's good enough for me. But then, I stuck with it, and I was challenged by the biblical calendar, specifically the sighted moon. That really challenged me. And I thought, oh boy, if I do this, I'll never get married. I'll be an outcast from not only my friends, but my own family. And that has come true. Sad to say. But I'm happy to say that although I'm an outcast from them, I've become even more precious in God's eyes. Because he loves those who love him. I just want to do what he wants me to do, not what I want to do. Although it's a battle every day, it's a war. It's a war every day. Choosing our will or his will. And it's not like it's so easy that I can just turn off my flesh. But it's a training. It really is a daily training that we got to exercise the strictest self-control, the strictest self-restraint. So anyhow, sabbatical years, Jubilee cycles, sightedmoon.com. Joseph Dumond has been a great blessing in my life. And I believe, yes, Jehovah's been a great blessing to my life. And he's used Joseph to restore these ancient paths and these ancient ways that, I hate to say ancient, but these true paths. They are the precious, most fine gold, the most valuable thing on this planet, the Word of God, His Torah, His Tanakh, and even people like Rivka in Israel there. I'm not going to say her last name. I don't want to dox her, but anyway, Rebecca there in Jerusalem, restoring the ancient ways. That was biblically ordained to declare the month declare the year new, when you see the Viv barley, and to actually know those things. I don't know those things. God has set her up as a watchman, a watchwoman, to see those things and to let us know, because otherwise how would we know? Unless, if not for her, then someone else. Kind of like Esther in a way. And now these truths from the Septuagint that are coming to me through my reading. I didn't ask for it, but Jehovah just opened my eyes to His Word. And there's so much pearls of wisdom to be gleaned from there. I have done a few presentations on true or false. For example, is the heart deceitful and wicked beyond all things? And evil, who can know it? Things like that. And are we to speak our own words in the Shabbat? I have presentations on those and many others. And those truths in the Septuagint are very liberating, because they show Jehovah is very compassionate and very wise. And we are fools. Only Jehovah can make all of mankind look like fools. I was wondering, at the beginning of this newsletter, where I was describing how all these things are happening. Even farmers are killing their own animals, burning their crops, and people have gone insane. But only Jehovah could do this, because if He doesn't, how can there be a famine? Sadly, no one wants the famine, but we all want Jehovah's plan to be fulfilled, and part of that is the famine. But that's why we must prepare now, not just physically, but more importantly, spiritually. But we must also prepare physically. It's our duty as stewards of this body, physical bodies, stewards of your families, as parents, as sons and daughters. So that's all I have to say. I really didn't want to cry, but I'm just being real with you. Many Jehovah's servants were emotional people, such as David. And, I don't apologize for that, actually. Yehoshua himself wept over Lazarus. It's a Middle Eastern thing to be emotional. It really is a Torah culture. Our culture, our Western culture, has been corrupted. It is satanic. It is a satanic culture that teaches men, teaches women, don't show emotions, don't cry, it's shameful. No, it's good. Although it does say in Scripture, there's a holy day, don't weep on it. But I don't weep. I don't lament. I cry happy tears. I am happy. This is my joy. I cry because Jehovah, you are good. And yes, one could laugh, but when you cry, you actually learn a lot more when your spirit is humbled. And something I've really learned this past week, to really be humble and to stay humble. And it's so easy to become arrogant and puffed up, but Jehovah knows that our best state is when we're repentant, in a repentant state, because he only accepts a humble spirit, a broken contrite heart. He will look upon. That's what He really looks on. He doesn't look at riches. He doesn't look at gold and silver. He doesn't look at all these bulls and rams and whatever you can give Him. He looks on that person that is humble in His eyes and who is willing to obey Him from the heart, not just on the outside, but does it because they really love Him and His Torah. And they do it not for the sake of saving their souls, but they really love Him. They want to be like Him. They want to give to others, because a lot of the Torah is really giving to others. It's being a blessing upon others' lives. It's not only serving ourselves. Yeah, we serve ourselves in some ways. We eat, for example. We clothe our bodies and seek shelter, and we sleep and all those things. We exercise. But a big part of Torah, the two greatest commandments isn't, love God and love yourself. No, it's love God and love your neighbor as you love yourself. So yeah, we are commanded to love ourselves, but love your neighbor first. It doesn't say love yourself as you love your neighbor. It says love your neighbor as you love yourself, because that comes so naturally to us. So I think I want to point that out. It's hard to do that right now, to really love your neighbor in this time of isolation. But through Zoom, like I'm doing right now, through various other means, we can also show love and give a word of encouragement to brothers or sisters in the faith. So that's all I have to say. I hope I didn't run out of space, and just thank you, and Jehovah bless you all. Thank you.